What if the secret to, modern romance isn't finding the perfect match, but actually finding someone who's willing to watch you completely fall apart?
I mean, that's a pretty terrifying thought for most of us, honestly.
Right. It totally goes against everything we're taught. Welcome to today's deep dive. Our mission today is to explore the incredibly unique literary landscape of KJ.
Yes, and we have a really fascinating stack of material from her to go through today.
We really do. So KJ is a data scientist, an environmental storyteller, and an author who is basically fundamentally trying to redefine how we think about modern romance, modern masculinity, and just the healing power of raw storytelling.
And her portfolio is just remarkably diverse. I mean, we're looking at everything from her eco-fables, like The Day Water Vanished, to her children's books.
Oh, yeah, The Adventures of Sally the Rescue Pup. That's the one that follows a mischievous Belgian Malinois traveling from San Francisco to Mumbai, right?
Exactly. And it is a genuinely beautiful series. It teaches these core concepts of empathy and resilience to kids, which is actually a thread, that you see pulled all the way through her work for adults.
Right. And that adult fiction is where we're really focusing our deep dive today.
Yeah.
Specifically, we're looking at her deeply emotional, beautiful men series and her surreal novel, Fever Dreams.
Which are they're intense, because when you step into KJ's world, she actively shatters the expected rules of storytelling.
Oh, completely.
Yeah.
You don't get a charming meet-cute or, a perfectly timed misunderstanding that resolves in the rain.
No, not at all. She actively wants her readers to squirm, using this technique she calls intentional discomfort.
Which really brings us to the central mystery we want to unpack for you today. Why would a romance author purposely write a protagonist that literary critics have literally called absolutely nuts and humiliating?
It's a great question. And to understand why she pushes her readers to that point of discomfort, we kind of have to look at how KJ views the modern world. She sees her work as a direct rebellion against the curated perfection of the digital age. We live in this era where everyone is constantly performing their lives online.
Yeah, I mean, we curate our photos, we draft our text messages to sound effortlessly witty, we project this image of having it all together.
Exactly. So when she sits down to write, she deliberately avoids packaging her stories into neat little, easily digestible boxes.
Which is immediately apparent in the very first book of the Beautiful Men series, The Dog Walker. The protagonist, Sarah, is dealing with this profound, heavy grief. Mm-hmm. And she develops this longing for her dog walker that the book describes as completely raw, unfiltered, and humiliating. I mean, it is messy.
It's incredibly messy. And some readers actually hated it.
Oh, yeah. There were reviews calling the book a narrative failure, specifically because Sarah's obsession made them so uncomfortable to read.
But the thing is, KJ completely embraced that criticism. She didn't back down or apologize for the messiness.
Not at all.
She explicitly stated that she does not write to flatter the reader. She writes to reveal. She has this brilliant operating philosophy where she says, discomfort is the art, and awkwardness is the honesty.
I love that. It's essentially the literary equivalent of accidentally opening the front-facing camera on your phone.
Oh, that is the perfect way to frame it.
Right. You're looking down, the lighting is terrible, you have a double chin, it's completely uncurated. It is jarring to look at, but it is undeniably 100% real.
Yes, exactly. The uncurated self is startling, mostly because we are just so unaccustomed to seeing it in media.
Wait, but let me play devil's advocate here. Isn't fiction supposed to be an escape? I mean, if my real life is already stressful, and I'm dealing with what her books accurately call existential claustrophobia, why would I want to spend my free time reading about someone else's humiliating messiness?
I totally get that.
Why not just give the reader happy distraction from all of that?
Because a happy distraction doesn't actually cure isolation, right? It just temporarily numbs it. KJ has this piercing critique of what she calls manufactured belonging.
Manufactured belonging.
Yeah, think about dating apps or social media. They offer this shimmering mirage of connection. We feel like we're part of a community because we are constantly seeing other people's updates.
But we aren't really connected.
Exactly. We are technologically linked, but fundamentally we are isolated. KJ believes that true intimacy simply cannot exist as a flawless performance.
Because if you're performing, you're not really there.
Right. If you're performing for your partner, you aren't actually connecting with them. You're just managing their perception of you.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So her use of discomfort is a highly specific tool, By forcing the reader to cringe at a character's flaws, she is opening a pathway to forging genuine connection through what she calls shared imperfection.
Oh, wow. So she's basically weaponizing their embarrassment to force them to be real. By stripping away the polish, she's saying, look at this absolute mess. We're all a mess underneath it all.
Precisely. And that requirement for shared imperfection doesn't just change how characters interact with each other, it fundamentally breaks down how they view themselves.
Which really comes into play with the men in her books, right?
It does. And this is where we see her storytelling get significantly deeper and more complex as she progresses from book to book, particularly in how she handles her male protagonists.
Which is such a fascinating evolution. I mean, in The Dog Walker, the male character functions mostly as a quiet, steady presence, providing silent comfort to a grieving woman.
Right.
But then in the next book, Beautiful Men, the chef, she flips the entire dynamic. The camera turns, and we dive straight into the man's own internal crumbling.
Yes. The chef is really a masterclass in deconstructing modern masculinity. We're introduced to Kevin, and on paper, he is the pinnacle of success.
Yeah, he's a Michelin-starred chef in San Francisco. He projects total control.
But internally, the narrative describes him as wearing the lead apron of depression. He's carrying this incredibly heavy, quiet burden of big city loneliness.
That phrase, lead apron of depression, is so heavy. And his counterpart is Tammy. She's an engineer who transitioned into a product manager role in tech. And despite being surrounded by people and constant communication at work, she's just as isolated as he is. But the story really zeroes in on painting masculinity in these very soft, surprising strokes.
It really does.
Kevin has to take off that literal and figurative lead apron to expose his inner demons. And we find out that his need for control stems from this deep childhood trauma.
Oh, the scene with the pie.
Yeah, there was a neighborhood bully named Mark who mocked him for his interest in baking. He physically crushed a pie right in Kevin's hand and told him to get a, quote, real hobby.
That moment with the crushed pie is so visceral, and it does so much psychological work for the character.
It's heartbreaking.
It really is. It wasn't just a bully being mean. It planted a deep-seated seed of shame. It taught Kevin at a young age that his authentic self, his gentle interests, weren't acceptable.
So he just hid them.
Right. He built this impenetrable armor of professional culinary excellence. When Kevin and Tammy first get together, they actually use the romance itself as a shield.
Like an escapist fantasy.
Exactly. So they can both avoid looking at their real, terrifying lives. But KJ's central argument is that you cannot heal while you are hiding. Healing requires confronting that darkness head on.
But, this completely goes against the grain of typical romance tropes. We are so heavily conditioned to expect the strong, silent type.
Oh, absolutely.
The guy who swoops in, has all the emotional answers, never wavers, and saves the day. But Kevin is actively falling apart. So how does a male protagonist unmasking his deep, heavy depression actually drive a romance forward?
Well,
doesn't that usually push a new partner away in these kinds of narratives?
It does in traditional narratives, which is exactly why KJ's approach is so radical. She is arguing that in the modern landscape, Kevin's unmasking is the romance.
Oh, I see.
She's dismantling the idea that modern masculinity requires invulnerability. In fact, invulnerability is the primary barrier to intimacy. True strength, in her view, requires the immense courage to show up broken.
Because if you never show your cracks, nobody can ever actually reach you.
Exactly. There is a pivotal scene where Kevin finally sits down with Tammy at a candlelit dinner, and instead of playing the suave, successful chef, he just bares his soul.
He just lays it all out.
Yeah, he talks openly about his depression, his shame, his paralyzing fears, and instead of running away, Tammy's doubts about him melt.
Wow.
By allowing her to see his pain, Kevin learns a crucial lesson, which is that he is worthy of love, flaws, and all. It demonstrates that mutual healing, rather than one person rescuing the other, is the ultimate sustainable foundation of a modern partnership.
It's a massive shift. It's not about being a savior. It's about being a willing witness to someone else's pain. But, okay, here's the logistical problem for these characters. Kevin and Tammy are both drowning in what the book calls a labyrinth of pixels.
Yes, the digital world.
They live in San Francisco. They work high-stress jobs. They are constantly tethered to their screens. If they're so fundamentally isolated by their digital environments, how do they actually pull themselves out of that virtual void to even have these heavy healing conversations in the first place?
That is the exact problem KJ has to solve narratively. And she does it by introducing physical, tangible anchors.
Right.
Because you're right. If Left to their own devices, they would stay stuck behind their screens forever. She has to provide lifelines to physically yank them back into reality. And she relies on two distinct, recurring motifs to do this: food and dogs.
Okay, let's break down the food aspect first, because it is so central to Kevin's character.
Yeah.
For him, cooking is not just a profession, it's the physical mechanism he uses to keep his despair at bay. The text refers to food as a lifeline for mental health.
It really is.
It becomes his primary form of nonverbal communication. Every single pinch of spice, every chopped vegetable, carries a fragment of his inner life. There are these stunning descriptions where preparing a simple potato leek soup or slowly reducing a sauce is treated as an act of devotion.
It acts as a spiritual sanctuary for him.
Yeah.
Think about the psychology here. When you are depressed, words often fail.
Yeah, finding the right words is exhausting.
Right. The cognitive load of explaining how you feel is just too heavy, but the physical act of manipulating ingredients grounds a person out of their spiraling thoughts.
That makes total sense.
When Kevin cooks for Tammy, he doesn't have to formulate the perfect text message. The hot meal itself says, "I see you. I want you nourished." It's an incredibly grounding, tactile act in a world that feels increasingly intangible and abstract.
And then there are the dogs, which tracks perfectly, considering KJ describes herself as a devoted dog mom.
Yes, exactly.
But she doesn't just use dogs as cute set dressing. They're utilized as beacons of absolute authenticity. Which brings me to how Kevin and Tammy actually meet.
Oh, the dating app scene.
Yes, Kevin is endlessly scrolling through dating apps.
Right.
And digital dating is essentially like reading the nutritional label of a meal instead of eating it.
That's a great way to put it.
You get all the stats, right? You know, their job, their height, their educational background. But none of that data actually feeds your hunger for connection.
That is the exact mechanism of their isolation. You have all the data, but zero intimacy.
So Kevin is staring at this pixelated menu of people. And Tammy's profile is the one that stands out. Not because of her job or her photos, but specifically because of her clear affinity for dogs.
Mm-hmm.
To Kevin, that signals a genuine real-world capacity for loyalty and care that you just can't fake.
Mm.
But of course, their digital connection stalls out. They text, but they don't move forward.
Naturally.
It takes scheduling a furry little playdate to force them to finally occupy the same physical space.
And in true KJ fashion, she doesn't let that meeting be a cute cinematic montage. The playdate is a complete chaotic disaster.
It goes entirely off the rails. The dogs fight, and then Tammy's dog, Charlie, falls seriously ill.
Right.
But I have to ask about the mechanics of this plot point. Isn't it a bit contrived to use a dog fight or a medical emergency to force two humans to be intimate?
Wow.
I mean, these are highly educated, articulate adults in their 30s. Why can't they just sit down and talk to each other without needing a crisis?
Because that highlights the insidious nature of their digital paralysis. They literally can't just talk.
Really?
Yeah, they are so deeply entrenched in managing their curated personas that normal conversation is just another performance. What's brilliant about using an animal in distress is that animals completely bypass the human ego.
Oh, they force you out of your head.
Exactly. A dog in medical distress does not care about your LinkedIn profile. It doesn't care if your apartment is messy or if you haven't thought of a clever response.
That's so true.
The panic of a vet visit physically overrides the part of the brain that curates our appearance. You cannot filter a medical emergency. It demands absolute, authentic presence in the immediate now.
So it strips away the performance.
Yes. A crisis with a pet violently strips away all the scripted performance they've been relying on. It shatters that digital paralysis and acts as the ultimate bridge from the virtual void back to raw, unscripted human interaction.
Because in that waiting room, you can't hide who you are when you're scared. It forces them to be messy and vulnerable in front of each other, which ties right back into her philosophy of intentional discomfort.
It really brings it all together.
And it perfectly mirrors the core lessons she embeds in her children's series, Sala the Rescue Pup. You have to show up for the chaos, and you have to have empathy when things go wrong.
That is the exact through line of her career. But, you know, if the chef shows us how physical anchors can save us, we have to look at what happens when she takes those anchors entirely away.
Oh, boy.
And that brings us to her novel, Fever Dreams, which pushes her themes of modern isolation to their absolute surreal limit.
Fever Dreams is an incredibly intense exploration of the paradox of connection. We have two protagonists, Dev, who is a machine learning engineer, a writer, and an Army reservist, and Mira, who is a Silicon Valley tech engineer who has recently been laid off.
Right.
And these two develop a profoundly deep emotional connection, but they do it entirely through a screen.
And the tragedy here is the environment they exist in. These are the literal architects of the digital world. They build the tech that connects people, yet they are completely trapped inside the machinery they helped create.
Yeah.
They're stuck in what the narrative calls the tomorrow loop.
The tomorrow loop. It's this perpetual mirage. The promise of actually meeting in person always recedes just as they get close to it. They keep saying, we'll meet tomorrow, but tomorrow never arrives.
It never does.
They just keep getting the quick dopamine hit of a text message while avoiding the terrifying reality of physical confrontation.
And because they never share physical space, because they don't have the grounded reality of cooking a meal together or dealing with a dog, the boundary between reality and illusion completely disintegrates.
That's so blurry.
The existential dread in this book is heavy. Mira starts having these vivid, recurring dreams of endless, empty hallways. She dreams of a distorted, fog-draped version of San Francisco where she is frantically searching for him, but only finding shadows.
Wow.
They even explicitly discuss authors like Kafka and Camus, comparing their endless digital purgatory to a nightmarish, absurd bureaucracy where you file paperwork but never see a judge.
It escalates to the point where Dev actually starts questioning his own sanity. He begins to wonder if Mira even exists in the real world, or if she is merely a psychological projection of his own intense, crushing loneliness. But this raises a major narrative problem, right? If the reader knows that this entire relationship might just be an illusion, a literal fever dream, doesn't that completely hollow out the romance?
Not necessarily.
Why should we care about their emotional stakes if the person on the other side of the screen might not even be real?
Because that ambiguity is the exact point KJ is making about the modern condition. She is arguing that the line between physical reality and digital illusion doesn't matter nearly as much as the emotional transformation the characters undergo.
So the mechanics of the relationship are secondary to the result.
Yes, exactly. Think about it. Even if their connection was filtered entirely through the safety of a screen, even if they never physically touched, the vulnerability they shared permanently altered the trajectory of their lives.
Because it felt real to them.
Right. Dev's writing fundamentally changes because of her. Mira is forced to confront her total loss of identity after her layoff because of his questions. The emotional reality was genuine, regardless of physical proximity.
That's a really interesting way to look at it.
By leaving it ambiguous, she forces the reader to hold a mirror up to their own digital interactions and ask a deeply uncomfortable question. Is your online self an accurate reflection of your true identity? Or is it just another carefully constructed mask that distances you from who you really are?
Which brings us full circle. Let's trace the entire journey we've taken through KJ's philosophy today.
Yeah.
We started with her outright rebellion against the polished fairy tale.
Yeah.
She uses intentional discomfort to make us squirm, forcing us to look at the raw, humiliating edges of grief and longing in the dog walker to shatter the facade of the perfect romance.
Then we explored how she uses that shared imperfection to completely reframe modern masculinity.
Right, with Kevin.
Exactly. With Kevin and the chef, she strips away the armor of the strong, silent type to prove that true strength and true intimacy requires a man to have the immense courage to unmask his depression and show up broken.
And finally, we unpack the paradox of our digital labyrinth. We saw how we can be starving for connection while staring endlessly at the menu of our screens.
We need those tangible physical lifelines, the silent devotion of cooking a meal or the ego-shattering chaos of a sick animal to tether us back to reality. And as we saw in Fever Dreams, without those anchors, we risk losing ourselves entirely in the fog of our own curated illusions.
You know, in a society that exerts constant crushing pressure on you to curate a flawless online profile, to perform perfectly at your job, and to never show weakness in your relationships, KJ's writing serves as a massive pattern interrupt.
It really does.
It is a powerful reminder that true intimacy is not a performance.
Yeah.
It's about having the courage to show up, as she beautifully writes, hungry, imperfect, and willing to be fed.
Hungry, imperfect, and willing to be fed. So, we want to leave you with a final thought to mull over after this deep dive ends.
Yes.
The next time you feel that sharp cringe of awkwardness or that terrifying spike of vulnerability in a conversation, whether you're messaging someone online or sitting across from them at a coffee shop, what if you didn't swipe away?
What if you didn't instinctively hide behind a witty joke or a digital filter? What if accidentally opening that uncurated front-facing camera on your life, what if leaning directly into that exact moment of intense discomfort is the only real doorway to the authentic connection you've been starving for?
It is definitely a question worth asking yourself.
Thanks for diving in with us.